Imagine standing in a room full of laughter, voices rising and falling like the tide, glasses clinking, stories weaving in the air. And yet, somewhere deep within, an inexplicable silence hums. You nod, you smile, you say the right things at the right times. But behind your polite expression, something ancient and restless whispers. Why do I feel so utterly alone among so many people? This is the modern paradox of connection, the illusion that being surrounded by others means we are truly together. Alan Watts, the philosopher who danced between Eastern mysticism and Western reason, once hinted that much of our socializing isn't connection at all, it's performance. Beneath the laughter lies fear. The fear of being left out, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being seen too clearly. We socialize not to share ourselves, but to conceal the parts of us that no longer fit the mask we've built. Watts often warned that our obsession with belonging blinds us to the truth of individuality. We seldom realize, he said, that our most private thoughts and emotions are not actually our own, for we think in terms of languages and images which we did not invent. In this way, the act of socializing becomes a rehearsal of inherited patterns, an endless echo of what culture expects us to be. Every conversation subtly molds us. We adjust tone, shape opinion, alter desire. We become mirrors facing mirrors, reflecting reflections, until it's impossible to find the original face. We learn what is acceptable, what is interesting, what is attractive. But who defines these terms? Society, with its invisible hand of approval and disapproval, whispers instructions like a stage director. And so, in our attempt to connect, we lose the very essence that might have made the connection real. This is not a call to isolation. It's an invitation to honesty. For Watts understood that the self discovered in solitude is not lonely but whole. Solitude, for him, was not withdrawal but clarity, the quiet necessary to hear one's own frequency. Socializing, on the other hand, often distorts that signal. The noise of conformity drowns out the inner voice. The desire to be understood replaces the courage to be authentic. We gather in digital spaces now, scrolling, posting, replying, convinced that each notification is proof of life. Yet never before have we seen such widespread emptiness, anxiety, and disconnection. We hunger for validation as though it were oxygen. We refresh the screen to reassure ourselves that we still exist. But every moment we spend performing for others, we step further away from the raw truth of being. And still we chase it. Why? Because we've been taught that solitude equals failure. To sit alone at a cafe is to be pitied. To decline an invitation is to be strange. To prefer silence over chatter is to risk invisibility. In a culture that worships extroversion, silence becomes rebellion. But perhaps rebellion is exactly what's needed. The danger of constant socializing isn't that we become disconnected from others. It's that we become disconnected from ourselves. The moment we stop being still long enough to listen inwardly, we begin to realize how much of our personality was constructed to keep us safe from rejection. The smile that hides fatigue, the agreement that betrays conviction, the laughter that silences grief. Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Hell is other people." He did not mean that others are inherently tormenting, but that our sense of self becomes distorted through their gaze. When we exist only in reflection of others, we become trapped in the image they hold of us. We trade authenticity for acceptance, freedom for familiarity. So perhaps the most radical act of all is not to connect, but to pause. To withdraw not out of disdain for the world, but out of reverence for the self still waiting to be heard. Socializing, then, may not be the cure for loneliness. It may be its cause. Every social encounter is a performance, though few dare admit it. From the moment we step into a room, we are already choosing our costume. The smile that will seem approachable, the tone that will sound confident, the silence that will seem mysterious but not cold. We are, in essence, actors in a collective play whose script we never consciously agreed to. The tragedy is not that we perform, but that we forget we are performing. Alan Watts often compared human life to a drama, one where we take our roles far too seriously. He said, "We are not isolated beings, but expressions of the universe, playing hide and seek with itself. Yet the modern social world has corrupted this playful cosmic theater into something rigid, anxious, and exhausting. We no longer play for joy, we perform for approval. Think about it. The subtle choreography of conversation, the calculated pauses, the strategic compliments, the way we tailor our opinions depending on who is listening. Every gathering becomes a negotiation of identity. We are constantly asking, who must I be right now to be accepted here? And every time we ask that question, something authentic dies quietly inside us. In this theater, masks are currency. You wear the intellectual mask with your colleagues, the light-hearted one with friends, the agreeable one with family. You switch between them so fluidly that the boundaries begin to blur. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize you no longer know what your real face looks like. This is why socializing can feel so strangely draining. It's not just the noise or the crowds. It's the psychic weight of maintaining 1,000 subtle deceptions. We pretend interest, enthusiasm, kindness, or even indifference, depending on what the moment demands. Over time, this pretense becomes second nature, and the true self grows faint like a forgotten melody. But here's the paradox. Society rewards those who play their parts well. The good conversationalist, the charismatic friend, the witty guest. These archetypes earn admiration, while the quiet observer is seen as distant or dull. The world encourages performance and punishes presence. Watts saw this dilemma clearly. He believed that we confuse the person, the Latin persona, meaning mask, for the self. The person is the mask you show the world, while the self is the vast, wordless awareness beneath it. When you socialize too often, your focus shifts entirely to the mask. You begin to live through it, feeding it with validation, compliments, and attention. And like any hungry creation, it demands more and more until you no longer remember who built it. To exist constantly in the presence of others is to risk losing the silence in which your real nature speaks. For in that silence, you encounter something unmeasurable, the sense that you are not merely an individual performing in time, but an unfolding moment of existence itself. Socializing distracts you from that encounter. It fills every gap with chatter, every pause with noise, every breath with someone else's opinion. And yet, there's a peculiar fear in not performing. Try being fully silent in a conversation. Observe how quickly others become uncomfortable, how the stillness exposes their unease. The silence threatens the illusion of constant engagement, of needing to be on. It's as if we collectively fear what might surface if we stopped pretending. Friedrich Nietzsche once remarked, "We are so accustomed to disguise ourselves to others that in the end we become disguised to ourselves." This is the quiet horror of excessive socialization. It's not just that others fail to see who we are, it's that we no longer do. The theater of the self runs endlessly, but the curtain can fall at any moment if you dare to step backstage. Behind the applause, behind the faces and the noise, there waits a vast stillness that doesn't need an audience. That stillness, Watts would say, is the truest home of consciousness, the one place untouched by the hunger to impress or belong. In stepping away from the crowd, we do not abandon humanity. We rediscover it in its purest form. For only when the performance ends can we finally remember that we were never just actors. We were also the stage, the music, and the light all along. There is a strange cruelty hidden within our yearning to belong. It wears a smile and speaks the language of connection, but beneath it lies a quiet violence. A self-erasure so subtle we often mistake it for love. We grow up believing that to be loved is to be accepted, and to be accepted is to conform. From childhood, we learn the delicate art of editing ourselves, softening opinions, hiding confusion, disguising anger, diluting individuality. We do this not out of malice, but survival. To belong is to feel safe. To stand apart is to risk exile. Yet, as Alan Watts warned, the cost of that safety is immense. It is the slow suffocation of the authentic self. Watts saw that the desperate chase for belonging is rooted in fear, the fear of our own aloneness. We treat solitude as an illness, when in truth it may be the cure. But our culture has conditioned us to equate solitude with failure. Why are you alone? becomes a question tinged with suspicion, as though being content with your own company were evidence of some private tragedy. And so we gather. We seek circles, communities, networks, each promising the comfort of inclusion. But inclusion, more often than not, demands sacrifice. Every tribe, no matter how kind, requires its members to adopt a shared rhythm. Speak too loudly, and you are arrogant. Speak too softly, and you are weak. Disagree too often, and you become difficult. Conformity masquerades as harmony. The tribe calls this unity. But unity built on suppression is not unity, it is quiet tyranny. The human need for social approval runs deep because it once ensured survival. In the ancient world, to be cast out from the group was to die alone in the wilderness. But today, that same instinct traps us in psychological cages. We trade our authenticity for a seat at the communal table, forgetting that what made us truly alive was never meant to be universally accepted. We mistake being liked for being known. Yet, being liked is conditional. It depends on how well you perform the version of yourself others wish to see. Being known, truly known, is dangerous. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to be misunderstood. Socializing often becomes the stage where we negotiate these conditions of acceptance. We laugh at jokes that don't amuse us. We agree with ideas that disturb us. We compliment to maintain equilibrium. And in doing so, we teach others how to treat our silence as compliance. Every time we betray our truth for belonging, we reinforce the falsehood that love must be earned through pretense. Watts would have called this the game of separate selves. We pretend to be separate entities trying desperately to unite, when in truth, unity already exists at a deeper level of awareness. Connection does not need to be constructed, it simply needs to be recognized. But recognition requires stillness, not socializing. When you sit in solitude, stripped of your roles and identities, the illusion of separateness fades. You see that the same consciousness animating you is animating everyone else. In chasing belonging through endless social engagement, we overlook the truth that belonging is not something to be achieved. It is something to be remembered. And yet, few are brave enough to remember. To do so is to risk alienation. Society punishes those who withdraw. The hermit, the recluse, the thinker, each is seen as an anomaly, someone who doesn't play well with others. But often, it is these very individuals who understand connection most deeply. For they see that genuine unity does not come from constant proximity, but from shared awareness. Arthur Schopenhauer once wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him." Socializing, with its predictable rhythms and rehearsed laughter, numbs us to that mystery. It replaces wonder with routine, insight with small talk, awareness with distraction. And so, the violence of belonging continues not through malice, but through habit. We lose ourselves gently, politely, one conversation at a time. But the moment we dare to be alone, the violence ends. For solitude, unlike socializing, demands nothing from us. It does not ask us to change, to impress, or to belong. It simply asks that we be. Listen carefully to the world, and you'll notice something unsettling. Silence has become almost extinct. The moment stillness begins to form, we drown it with sound. Music, conversation, scrolling, television, chatter. We reach for noise the way an addict reaches for a fix. Why? Because silence is a mirror, and few of us are prepared to see what it reflects. Alan Watts warned that constant stimulation, especially through socializing, is not aliveness, but sedation. It numbs us under the illusion of participation. We talk to feel engaged, to feel real, to feel like we're doing something. But in truth, much of our talk is a way of avoiding consciousness itself. Muddy water, Watts said, is best cleared by leaving it alone. Yet we keep stirring the water, terrified of what we might see in its still surface. Socializing becomes a socially approved form of distraction. When the mind grows restless, we reach for company, for conversation, for digital noise. We confuse the absence of silence for the presence of meaning. We tell ourselves we're connecting, but what we're often doing is escaping. escaping the uneasy quiet where our unresolved questions live. It is easier to talk than to think, easier to laugh than to feel, easier to be surrounded than to be seen. What's understood that silence is not emptiness. It is the space where truth resonates. Noise, on the other hand, becomes a wall we build to protect ourselves from depth. Socializing, when practiced without awareness, fortifies that wall. It gives us something to do instead of something to understand. It keeps the mind too busy to confront its own confusion. Consider the social rituals of modern life. The endless parties, the networking events, the chatter about weather, gossip, or trends. Beneath it all hums a collective fear. What if I stopped talking? What if I were alone with my thoughts? That question, for many, feels more dangerous than death. Because in the absence of others' noise, we begin to hear the subtle tremor of our own being. A sound both beautiful and terrifying. The truth is, we are afraid of silence because silence tells the truth. It reveals our emptiness, our contradictions, our yearning. It shows us the distance between who we are and who we pretend to be. When we socialize constantly, we postpone that reckoning. We hide in words, in company, in the comfortable hum of distraction. Watts would call this the mad dance of civilization. A rhythm that values activity over awareness, connection over contemplation. We equate talking with understanding, but real understanding rarely happens in noise. It blooms in the pauses between words. In our age of digital saturation, socializing has taken on a new, more addictive form. Every notification, every ping, every message gives us a dopamine spark, a fleeting sense of importance. We refresh our feeds not to learn, but to avoid the discomfort of stillness. The world has taught us to fear quiet moments because quiet moments reveal how little we actually need from it. The constant noise serves another function. It keeps us from feeling. True emotion arises in silence. Grief, awe, love. These things require space, but noise compresses them, forcing them into we no longer feel deeply. We emote publicly. Quick reactions and superficial exchanges. Even our pain has become performative. Blaise Pascal captured this perfectly when he wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Watts might have smiled at that because it expresses the essence of his insight. We seek solace in company because we cannot bear to face the self that company obscures. To socialize endlessly is to anesthetize the soul. It gives the illusion of engagement while draining the capacity for presence. The silence we avoid is not the enemy, it is the path. It is the doorway through which awareness enters. But awareness requires stillness, and stillness demands courage. So we keep talking. We fill the air, the screen, the room, anything to avoid the echo of our own existence. But one day, the noise fades, the crowd disperses, and all that remains is you, and the silence that has been waiting patiently all along. There comes a moment, often after the exhaustion of endless talking, endless striving, endless seeking, when silence is no longer frightening, feels instead like oxygen. You stop trying to fill the void and begin to listen to it. And in that listening, something ancient stirs. The realization that you were never truly alone, only distracted. Alan Watts believed that aloneness is not isolation, but the recognition of unity. To be alone is not to be cut off from the world. It is to see that you are the world, looking at itself from a particular point of view. You are the universe experiencing itself, he said, not as metaphor but as truth. The tragedy of modern socializing is that it teaches us to forget this, convinces us that meaning lies in others' eyes, when in fact, meaning is what looks through them. When you stop socializing long enough to sit with yourself, not your roles, not your achievements, but your raw being, an astonishing thing happens. The anxiety to prove, to impress, to belong begins to dissolve. You realize that the person you were always trying to make others like is the same person you never truly loved yourself. And in that realization lies a freedom far greater than any approval the world can offer. This is why what's often said that spiritual awakening begins in solitude. The moment you stop performing for the crowd, you start participating in the cosmos. You see life not as a stage to conquer but as a dance to join. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels vast, alive, shimmering with presence. True solitude is not loneliness. It is intimacy without distraction. When you are fully alone, you begin to sense the hum beneath all things, the pulse of existence that never leaves you. It is the same hum you can hear when you stop talking, when you stop pretending, when you stop trying to be understood. That hum is what you were searching for in every conversation, every friendship, every desperate attempt at connection. And so, the paradox completes itself. What we chase in socializing is found only in solitude. What we call connection is often escape, and what we call isolation is often truth. The liberation of aloneness is terrifying at first because it requires the death of your social identity. You must be willing to step away from the mirrors that reflect you, from the voices that define you, from the rhythms that lull you. But once that identity dissolves, you are no longer fragmented. You are whole. You no longer need the world to echo back your worth, because your worth shines through being itself. There is a quiet joy in this kind of freedom. The mind stops demanding, "Who am I to them?" and begins to ask, "Who am I truly?" And the answer doesn't arrive as a word, or a thought, or a definition. It arrives as stillness, a presence too deep to describe, too intimate to share. It is not meant to be socialized. It is meant to be lived. Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The crowd is untruth." He meant that truth is born in the single individual who dares to stand apart, to listen inwardly rather than outwardly. Watts echoed this sentiment in his own way. He urged people to drop out not in rebellion against society, but in reunion with being. To withdraw from the crowd is not to reject humanity. It is to rediscover it beyond the illusion of separateness. For when you finally stop chasing others' reflections, you begin to see the world not as something out there, but as something happening through you. The trees breathe as you breathe. The stars burn as you think. The ocean moves as your blood flows. The boundary between you and the universe vanishes, and with it, the need for constant validation. So perhaps socializing is the worst thing you can do, not because it is evil, but because it distracts you from the vastness of what you already are. We were never meant to talk our way into meaning. We were meant to fall silent and remember it. And in that remembering, something beautiful happens. The loneliness dissolves. The masks fall away. You realize that you have never been apart from anything. Not the people, not the stars, not the silence. You were never lonely. You were only asleep in the noise.